Almost immediately after Henry VIII saw the portrait of the mysterious, solitary Anne of Cleves, his heart, or rather his imagination, was so captivated by her that he eagerly decided to make her his bride. However, when their destinies finally crossed in person some time later, everything within the young king seemed to come to a sudden halt. He encountered an unfamiliar and unusual appearance, so different from his usual standards that he felt revulsion. He claimed she was incredibly ugly, and this extreme judgment gradually became part of her infamous reputation as a rejected queen whose fate was that of a failure. Nevertheless, modern historians tend to suggest that his true reason for rejection might not have been merely her vneshness, but a much deeper and more troubling underlying cause hiding behind the superficial aspects of this tragic conflict. Anne of Cleves's destiny was intertwined with her family's insularity and stubbornness. Her background was characterized by resilience and steadfastness. She was a member of an influential and headstrong lineage, known for centuries for its independence. Her father, John, Duke of Cleves, was one of the most prominent yet controversial figures of the Protestant Reformation. He openly criticized the clergy and the religious hierarchy of Rome, openly favoring reformist ideas and opposing the Vatican. Anne and her siblings were raised with principles of independent thought and critical analysis, which was quite unusual among aristocrats of that time. When John initiated his confrontation with the Catholic Church by separating from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, he became a staunch opponent of Catholicism and the Pope. During this time, as she grew up, Anne found herself in a household full of women, where gentle confidence and warmth of trust became her refuge and support. It was there that she was destined to find protection and backing, especially in moments when her mother and relatives, upon learning of Henry VIII's intentions, tried to prevent the development of romantic feelings between the young girl and the English king. It should be noted that Henry VIII, in his own years, was not only ambitious and ruthless, but also exceptionally difficult for those around him. Interestingly for poor Anne, at just 24 years old, an age quite mature for a young queen, meeting this man proved to be an especially challenging ordeal. Henry was often described as a man of great firmness and stubbornness, which made his character truly complex. Most intriguingly, he not only courted Anne as a potential wife, but also considered marrying her younger sister, Amalia, making the situation even more complicated and delicate. Part 2 of 8. One might even suppose that if fate had turned out differently, and Henry had decided to marry Amelia instead of Anna, the tragic ending of his fourth marriage might never have happened, or could have ended much more favorably. In that case, history would have unexpectedly changed, and the lives of both sisters might have taken a different course than what is recorded in history. In the late 1530s, King Henry VIII gave his court painter, Hans Holbein, a very peculiar task: to create portraits of both sisters, Anna and Amelia, keeping in mind that he intended to make his final choice based on these images. As a result of this masterful work, the artist produced an accurate and detailed depiction of both women to help the king decide which one he found more appealing and who more closely matched his goals. This document served as a kind of key decision in his momentous quest and reflected the complex interplay of emotions and strategies involved, an interplay that entangled not only him, but also the destinies of both sisters, whose lives were so intertwined with that of the king. Henry also provided Holbein with very clear and specific instructions to portray the women carefully and without excessive flattery, as he needed to create an image of a true, magnificent queen. When the time came to begin creating the portraits of the Cleves sisters, the renowned artist Hans Holbein faced a significant difficulty that complicated the entire process. Both Anna and Amelia traditionally wore veils, a custom rooted in the strict German traditions of that time, which emphasized modesty and secrecy. As a result, the artist had to make considerable efforts to gain the trust of both women, as they needed at least some relaxation and openness to reveal themselves. Only after Anna and her sister finally uncovered their faces, allowing the artist to depict them, was Holbein able to complete the task. After the portraits and their assessments, Henry, upon seeing both images, apparently favored Anna over Amelia. However, his choice was not driven by feelings or romantic inspiration, as the king's motives were more likely rooted in political or hereditary considerations. Many historians agree that his preference may have been connected to the fact that, as the older daughter, Anna possessed a greater hereditary claim than her younger sister. Henry's order not to flatter Olivia directly contradicts the popular theory that the artist deceived the king by creating an embellished portrait portraying Anna as ambitious and beautiful, though in reality she was plain. However, as any person examining the image could see, much could be unnoticed in the portrait, especially when it concerns a delicate matter such as appearance. And so, when Anna entered the room, Henry immediately showed signs of dissatisfaction. Almost immediately after her arrival, he expressed his disappointment with her appearance and accused not only Olin, who, according to him, exaggerated her charms too much, but also his chief advisor Thomas Cromwell, who encouraged him to marry Anne and constantly praised her attractiveness. Henry's exact reaction to his first impression of the new participant in this important event went down in history as somewhat shameful. He probably exclaimed, "She is not as beautiful as they say." Oh, what an awkward situation. Nevertheless, despite the king's unpleasant reaction, wedding plans were already in full swing. There was no turning back. He had to proceed. And so, when the pair finally entered into marriage officially, they faced another heavy and significant night. Although Anna had a chance to become somewhat more significant in Henry's eyes, everything happened far from as he would have liked. The morning after the wedding, historians say, the king complained to his close associates, "I liked her before, although not very much, but now I have lost interest in her." The story of Anna and Henry VIII is filled not only with personal dramas and family conflicts, but also with complex political intrigues, and the reasons for their endless problems go far beyond purely personal relationships. Ultimately, only clumsy or misguided actions by Anna could not have been the main reason why her fate unfolded this way. After all, King Henry VIII was notorious for his tendency to change his personal life and preferred to marry young and obedient women. In his eyes, perhaps, the true love or a deep spiritual connection mattered less than the woman's ability to meet his expectations. Unlike this, Anna proved not to be quite the suitable candidate. Her insufficient attractiveness to the monarch and, more importantly, the unpleasant smell he perceived, especially at inopportune moments. All of this became a reason for insulting accusations. After the initial meeting and the unsuccessful wedding night, Henry, overwhelmed with disappointment and anger, began already looking for ways to get rid of Anna. And at this point, he was aided by a rather clever idea. In 1527, when Anna was only 11 years old, she was briefly betrothed to another man, Francis of Lorraine. Henry, burdened by the need to obtain a divorce, and his advisors attempted to use this youthful agreement as evidence that Anna was not considered free to marry the king at that time. Therefore, to support his intentions, the monarch arranged a large-scale court proceeding for the annulment of their marriage, which turned into a real spectacle with elements of a circus. Henry, seeking to divorce them officially, argued that he and Anna had never entered into a marital union with full knowledge of the matter. That is, they never consummated the marriage. At the same time, he had no desire to be caught impotent, as this would greatly discredit him as a king. Therefore, he hired a doctor to confirm his male abilities, who stated that His Majesty had experienced 2 nocturnal emissions, that is, night dreams with a wet dream, and moreover, that he had slept with Anna for several consecutive days without engaging in close, intimate relations. This information was perhaps so delicate and unpleasant that it was hard to justify. Ultimately, despite all the difficulties, Henry achieved his goal, and on July 9, 1540, their brief and rather unattractive marriage was officially dissolved. Just 6 months later, which was one of the shortest spans in his long and complex series of marriages, Anna seemingly parted from this painful ordeal with relief. She maintained her dignity despite everything and continued to hold her head high, avoiding devastating consequences from the divorce process. However, Despite these apparent successes, the true story of Anna and Henry was only just beginning. While he was still married to Anne of Cleves, Henry demonstrated his cold-blooded cruelty and treachery. Confident that his current wife was not the only one, he immediately began searching for a new companion. Soon, the monarch settled on a young and attractive lady, Catherine Howard. And just a few weeks after divorcing Anna, he married her, thus continuing his chain of marital adventures and political machinations. This story, filled with disappointments, deceptions, and incessant infidelities, became one of the highlights of the English crown era. Anna never publicly expressed hatred or resentment toward Catherine Howard, the person who replaced her on the throne and in the royal marriage bed. By the beginning of the new 14th century, changing and complex emotions had long infiltrated the court, and for Anna, despite her exile from the splendid crown, there remained hope of preserving her dignity and fidelity to her principles. In the early 2000s, already in the 21st century, she even gifted her former husband and his new wife two elegant horses, carefully selected for driving and outings, and joined the couple at social dances, demonstrating that her heart was still capable of friendship, or, at least, respectful relations. However, the fact that Anna was freed from direct contact with Henry VIII and could maintain her independence did not mean that contradictions and doubts did not rage within her. Dark rumors began to circulate within the castle, quickly attracting attention and speculation. By November 1541, there were whispers that Anna of Cleves had secretly given birth to a child. What was particularly intriguing and stirred excitement was the hint from some sources that the child might have been the king, Henry VIII's own son. Although these rumors most likely turned out to be mere false speculation, the royal court nonetheless took measures. An investigation into the rumors and gossip was launched, and two individuals were detained for spreading claims that Anna was his true wife and had entered into a secret or semi-secret union with him. In the year 1542, the situation surrounding Anna worsened again, as Henry, enraged by suspicions and hurt feelings, believed that his current wife, Queen Catherine Howard, was unfaithful to him. As a result of this assumption, the poor girl faced a fate similar to that of Anne Boleyn, execution for alleged adultery and treason. Henry, unwilling to undergo painful breakups and torment again, lashed out in fury at Anna of Cleves, showing her cruelty and unpredictable severity. Despite all the incidents, their relationship maintained a certain delicacy and a peculiar form of friendship as a way to escape the tension, since some connection between them still remained, mostly driven by Anna's desire to keep control of the situation and preserve her independence. During this difficult period, in a burst of vulnerability and anger, Henry sent Anna a letter ordering her to return the royal ring given to her earlier by Catherine Howard as a symbol of their ties and authority. When, in 1542, Henry finally executed his fifth wife for adultery, Anna secretly held a very important fact, something that could have touched her, yet was unknown to others. Perhaps she perceived the execution not as a tragedy, but as a chance for new hopes. Numerous hints indicate that after the violent death of Catherine Howard, Anna of Cleves harbored a hidden hope of remarrying Henry and convincing him that she could become as good a wife as she had been his loyal friend in recent years. In the end, the king chose Catherine Parr as his future wife, thus forever altering Anna's fate and personal plans. Anna had a sufficiently decent initial preparation for a European princess, and by nature she was intelligent enough to learn English quickly and speak it fluently. However, there was one major problem. Unfortunately, the strict and conservative views of her family, in which she was raised, prevented her from indulging in light-hearted activities such as music, singing, or dancing, which were not accepted in their circle. Unlike her, Henry had demonstrated a deep interest in the arts throughout his life. Therefore, even if Anna had been able to speak English freely, it is unlikely they would have many conversations. Being a cunning and perceptive woman, she quickly established a rapport with all of Henry's children. She not only found common ground with them, but also sent gifts to the heir to the throne, the future Edward V, or Sixth, showing concern for his future. She was also close to the future Queen Mary I and she left a portion of her jewelry collection to the future Elizabeth of Fearn upon her death, which testified to her sincere attachment and trust. Ultimately, Anna understood well the source of her inner strength, and it was this realization that brought her rewards. Later in life, she mostly became a model of quiet and idyllic existence. Utilizing her friendship with Henry's children, she gained great favor at the court of his daughter, Queen Mary I, and over time she withdrew from secular affairs, leading a calm and secluded life away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Ultimately, Anna's involvement in Henry's children's lives not only secured her a prosperous old age, but also opened all doors to further freedom. She could pursue any desires she had, even after his death. Anna was so close to Queen Mary that she probably attended her coronation at Westminster Abbey in person, becoming part of a historic event. Henry, despite his irascible character, proved to be a generous ex-husband to Anna of Cleve, unlike most of his other ex-wives, who often ended up with nothing. After their separation, Henry provided her with a settlement that included not only substantial estates and income, but also refined manners, which helped her maintain her respectable position and financial independence. And that was very important. But his kindness did not end there. Later, despite the divorce, Henry continued to show her occasional signs of attention and kind gestures. He decreed that after the divorce, Anna would occupy one of the highest and most honorable positions among English women, one that, in status, would surpass all others except the wife of the king and his daughter. He even adopted her, elevating her to the status of the king's beloved sister. It would seem that all this should have atoned for the torment and suffering he inflicted on her for many years. But most likely, the answer to that is negative. The essence lies in how the legendary hideous woman of Henry VIII's wives actually appeared, about whom many rumors circulated. Frankly speaking, perhaps she was not as dreadful as they said. Still, it must be acknowledged that despite her tall, slender figure and beautiful blonde hair, her face had features that created a rather stern expression. This austerity added about 24 years to her apparent age, making her quite old for her years. Anna lived out her brief tenure as the fourth wife of the English king, but fate had prepared for her a far darker destiny in the future. Henry, under whose order her close friend and advisor Thomas Cromwell, one of the founders of her acquaintance with the king, was executed, initially decided to deal with him for his betrayal on the very day he married his fifth wife, Catherine Howard. The greatest mystery of all this is why, if Henry so despised Anne, he did not run away while he still had the opportunity. After all, he was the absolute ruler of England, and could have simply snapped his fingers, annulled the marriage, and gotten rid of her without much risk. Essentially, everything came down to the fact that Anne and Henry were a political couple, bound by a treaty, not mutual love. At that moment, it was almost impossible to annul the marriage, as doing so could offend his German allies, thereby risking the rupture of their political alliance. Anne outlived not only the other queens Henry had, but also the monarch himself. She died on July 20th, 1557, just a few months before her 42nd birthday, most likely from cancer. When her heart stopped beating, her family and close friends expressed their grief. Since Anne of Cleves was the beloved aunt of Queen Mary I, she was buried in Westminster Abbey, although in a less prominent place than the main tombs of the kings and queens buried there. But Anne had another trump card, hidden behind all this sorrow. Despite her death, an inscription remained on her gravestone: Anne of Cleves, Queen of England. Moreover, she remains the only one of Henry's wives buried in this historically significant place. Today, she is often referred to as merely a rejected queen, but modern historians tend to suggest different reasons for his animosity. According to their view, Anne's first meeting with Henry was a true diplomatic mistake that later shaped their entire destiny. During a trip to London, Anne's group stayed in the city of Rochester on the eve of the 14th of July, 1540. At that moment, she took a moment to look out the window at the scenes unfolding on the streets, especially captivated by a particular spectacle: a fierce bullfight, which, unfortunately, was a common form of entertainment in those times, and served as a spectacle for local residents. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, an unfamiliar man of strong build entered the room, clearly extremely determined and self-confident. However, behind this seemingly formidable man was none other than Henry VIII himself, disguised and attempting to get inside to see his future bride. He hoped that, thanks to the power of true love or some special circumstances, she would recognize him without words and understand who was standing before her. Depending on the version of events, either the king was trying to attract her attention, hoping his disguise would work and he could leave a positive impression, or he dared to completely reveal himself, trying to kiss her, or even more persistently accost Anne, something that undoubtedly caused her alarm, as sudden and inappropriate advances from a stranger could lead to intense fear. In any case, what happened turned into a real disaster. Anna felt confused, and Heinrich, seeing her negative reaction, left the meeting place, overwhelmed with disappointment, embarrassment, and possibly hidden resentment. Some historians believe that this unsuccessful first encounter had a significant influence on their fate. Anna's negative attitude, even if it was concealed or implicitly expressed, forced the king to adopt a defensive stance. If she did not make a good impression on him, he might have decided that it was not worth choosing her as a bride in the future, regardless of everything. It is known from history that such moments sometimes lead to life-changing decisions, and in this case, subsequent events unfolded according to a well-known script that laid the foundation for their future destinies.